Gardening can be a challenge. There's so much to know and so much to do and so much that can go wrong. So how do you deal with it when things don't always go your way? Join me today as I share with you some thoughts on the challenges of gardening. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and this is my Colorado Zone 5B garden. Now, all gardeners have some challenges within their own unique garden space. Here in Colorado, we tend to have quite a few that you might not have. We have very cold winters, very hot summers, very dry humidity. We have thunderstorms that roll through that drop hail the size of golf balls on a regular basis. And at 7,500 foot elevation, I'm basically gardening in the mountains, which offers a whole nother realm of challenges, to include high winds. This last week, we encountered 4 straight days of high winds, averaging 35 to 50 miles per hour every single day. And finally, I have a nice day today. Last night was my first night above freezing so far this spring. The forecast temperatures for today are up to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. It seems like spring is finally here. Maybe the challenges are behind me, but having lived here long enough, I know to look to the long-term forecast. And 5 days from now, the high temperature is supposed to be 30 degrees Fahrenheit. I know that for me, in spring, I'm going to encounter that roller coaster. Very high temperatures, very low temperatures, and it might be too soon to get plants in the ground. But I want to. I want to start my seeds and get my plants going. And that brings us to the first aspect of challenges. Learn what you need to do to get those seeds in the ground. And one of the best things to do that is with a soil temperature probe so that I can monitor those temperatures. Right now, my soil temperature is 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a magic number because at 40 degrees, I can begin germinating a lot of the cool season plants I want to grow. Spinach, Swiss chard, lettuce. There are so many plants that I love to grow, like peas and kale, that can go in the ground when the soil temperature finally reaches 40. So even though I have cold temperatures ahead, I can finally get some of the seeds in the ground because I understand that this is a magic tool to overcome that particular challenge. Too often, gardeners are fooled by warm days in spring and put their seeds or plants in the ground too soon. I like to take that scientific approach with a soil probe and to monitor the soil temperature. But nature gives us some of the clues. I gardened for years without a temperature probe and did just fine. In this bed of garlic, my garlic is about 3 to 4 inches high now. It just started sprouting last week, a good sign that the soil temperature has reached about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. You may live in an area with forsythia. When the forsythia blooms, well, that's a good indication in late March or early April that you can start putting some of your seeds and maybe even some of your plants in the ground. Learning about your specific garden, your climate, your weather patterns, and the plants that are growing best in your region is really a good way to start approaching some of the challenges that you might have when that weather changes dramatically. I like the idea of a soil probe, but it's not for everybody. I understand how different seeds germinate at different temperatures. That's developed with experience. And with experience, you'll be able to confront and overcome the challenges in your garden. Another challenge that confronts me and many other gardeners is a short growing season. You just have to expect that at high altitude in Colorado. I might get 130, if I'm lucky, 135-day growing season with the good days that I need for plants to develop. One way to deal with that is with hoops over my beds. By having hoops over my vegetable beds and covering these hoops with plastic in early spring and in early autumn, I can extend my growing season. I can add at least 1, often 2 weeks of growing on the front side and on the back side. So I recognize the challenge, a short growing season, but by protecting my plants, I can extend that and get a much longer growing season. I also like the hoops to protect my plants in summer because we can get well over 100 degrees with very low humidity, which is a stress on the plants. By adding shade cloth on my hoops, I can cool off the plants. And during the thunderstorm season, when that hail is going to come, well, I can either use that shade cloth to help protect from that hail, or actually use hail cloth to protect my plants. Hail is actually my summer nemesis when it comes to trying to grow my vegetable garden. There are some years that a single storm has devastated the entire garden. So as I've expanded this gardening space, I've created this enclosed garden specifically with a focus on defeating hail. In a big garden, it can be a challenge to come out and put that cover on all of those hoops. You might not be able to do it in time. So I constructed this garden with these tall posts, and I string wire between the posts. This wire is to support hail cloth that I cover this entire space with. Last year, we only had 1 big hailstorm, but the hail cloth here was good enough to protect all of my tomatoes and peppers and squashes. Everything growing in this area was not even touched by the hail. I recognized the challenge and overcame that challenge with my garden design. I like growing fruit trees, but I have deer that wander into my garden, and deer like eating fruit trees. So I have bird netting over all of my fruit trees. The bird netting is enough to keep the deer from nibbling some of these younger branches. And behind the trees, I have these poles that my granddaughters painted. As the trees grow larger, these poles will support the bird netting over the entire tree. I also discovered recently that I have a dog that likes to eat fruit trees as well. And so even though Mala is a wonderful garden companion, she's already devastated, completely eaten 3 of my fruit trees that I hadn't put bird netting on yet. The bird netting is enough to keep her off. And as I put in more fruit trees this year, I have to anticipate not only the potential deer problem, but the Mala problem. The bird netting works pretty well for the larger fruit trees. For the younger and smaller trees, now I'm going to have to overcome that challenge by surrounding them with a fencing that Mala can't get through. Identifying the challenges you have and then trying to figure out how to confront those challenges and overcome the issues will be different for all gardeners. Not every gardener has hail and needs to construct a fully enclosed garden, but many of us do have animal issues. I also have gophers, so all of my raised beds have wire mesh at the bottom, and it helps deter the gophers from tunneling underneath. Mala is great at dealing with gophers and digging up their tunnels. I've already seen a decrease in gopher activity since Mala's helped me out in the garden. And I've worked with her on most of the raised beds. She doesn't dig in my tall beds, but this low bed in particular, well, for her, it's close enough to the ground and she knows the gophers are there that she has dug some holes. I'm still confronting this particular challenge, how to stop Mala from digging in this bed. I'll figure it out this season. Right now, I'm okay with it. I recognize that it is something I need to deal with, and I'll figure a workaround, even if it is just putting up a little barrier around the edges to keep her out. Simple, probably worthwhile, but it will take extra effort. And you need to recognize that. It's going to take extra effort when you have a problem that you have to deal with. And you have to recognize and accept that some challenges may be just too big to overcome. Sometimes you really have no choice but to accept that something devastating has happened to your garden. It will influence how you garden and how you plan gardening beyond that point. Last year and the year before, we had record-setting cold temperatures in spring, after the trees had set the buds and began to leaf out. It was so cold that it killed all of the buds 2 years running and killed many trees in our region. This willow tree would not have been a choice of mine to plant, but it was here when I moved in. It was killed last year, as was the one behind it. My neighbor had 12 trees that were lost in the last 2 years. His choice was to cut them out and remove them. Because what do you do with dead trees throughout your landscape? You really can't overcome that problem. One of the ways I'll deal with it is through my plant selection. When I do put trees in, I'm going to choose trees that are late flowering, late leafing, so that if we have those late freezes again, fewer of my trees will be impacted. Sometimes the challenge is created by the gardener because we're trying to grow something that wouldn't normally grow in a garden like the ones we have. I want to grow blueberries, but here in Colorado, the native soil is just too alkaline for blueberries to do well. They need an acidic soil, and I just don't have that. That's the challenge. So to overcome that, I need to fix my soil. I need to change it so blueberries can grow, and that's what I've done in these pots, as I showed in a recent video. I've amended this soil to lower the pH to the point that I can grow blueberries. The challenge was simply because I wanted to grow something that wouldn't normally grow in my area. It was relatively easy to overcome. And we can do that throughout our garden if we want to push the limits, if we want to challenge ourselves. We need to recognize why it's a challenge and then take appropriate action so that we can do it. I've encountered many other gardening challenges over the years. Some of them I've accepted. Most of them I've dealt with and figured out a way to grow what I want to grow in the garden that I have. It may be something as simple as a temperature probe. It may be watching a YouTube video to get an idea of what to do with a specific problem. Often it's just being creative and trying new things to fix the problems that we have. If you're a new gardener, no doubt those challenges are coming. If you're an experienced gardener, I'm sure you have many stories to tell. As we share our stories, we're going to improve the chances that we can overcome those challenges for all of us as we proceed along our gardening journey. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.